There are things that the awakened soul must protect, not because they are shameful or dark, but because the sacred cannot survive in the noise of the profane. When you begin to awaken spiritually, your energy starts to shift. You see, feel, and understand life differently. But with that awakening comes responsibility to guard what is holy within you. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet, in the process of becoming, there are truths that must remain hidden, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You see, people who have not yet seen themselves will always misinterpret those who have. When you speak from the depth of your spirit to someone still living on the surface, they will call you strange, arrogant, or delusional. That is why Jung warned that the one who awakens too early often suffers, because he walks among those who are still asleep. There are 5 things that the awakened must never reveal. Not because they are secrets in the worldly sense, but because they are sacred codes of your inner transformation. They lose their power when exposed to those who cannot understand their weight. The first thing you must never reveal is the depth of your spiritual experiences. When God, the universe, or whatever name you give to the divine, begins to move through you, those moments are not for public display. They are not meant to be turned into conversations or content. They are meant to be digested in silence, to be lived, not shared. Jung called this the process of individuation, the path by which a person becomes whole. And that process demands solitude. You cannot become whole if your sacred experiences are constantly broken by the opinions of others. The second thing you must guard is your inner wounds. Not because you should hide your pain, but because the world doesn't know how to handle it. When you reveal your suffering to people who have not yet healed, they will either dismiss it or exploit it. Jung once observed that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, but that pain must be integrated privately, turned into wisdom before it becomes language. People who have not yet faced their own shadows will project theirs onto yours. They will contaminate your healing with their misunderstanding. And the third thing you must never reveal too soon is the vision that God placed in your heart. Spiritual vision is like a newborn, fragile, sacred, dependent on your protection. When you share your vision with those who lack the eyes to see, they will kill it with doubt, mockery, or subtle envy. Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." When you begin to awaken to your true calling, protect that inner flame. Don't explain it to those who live in the cold. There is a mystery to divine timing. Not every insight is meant to be spoken immediately. Sometimes silence is not avoidance, it is strategy. The spiritual world works differently from the social world. In the spiritual world, energy precedes form. Words are containers, but silence is the temple. When you learn to hold silence, you learn to hold power. Jung understood that the soul reveals itself in symbols, dreams, and paradoxes. That's why he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you are spiritually awake, you begin to see how many people are still ruled by their unconscious. You begin to see how much of what they call reality is simply a projection of their inner chaos. And that is why you must not throw your pearls before swine, not because you think you are better, but because your truth deserves to be treated with reverence. To be awake is to walk with a secret light. It's to know that the divine hides in the details of your day, in the silence of your thoughts, in the spaces between your words. But if you try to prove your awakening, you lose it. Spiritual awareness does not need validation. It needs discipline. The spiritually awake live between two worlds, the seen and the unseen. You are learning how to balance heaven and earth inside your heart. You speak less, but you perceive more. You react less, but you discern deeper. You begin to see patterns in people's words, energies in their intentions, truth behind their masks. And that sensitivity is not a burden. It's a divine gift. But it's also dangerous if you forget to guard it. Because when light enters darkness, darkness notices. When you start to shine, the world around you shifts. Some will be drawn to your light. Others will be disturbed by it. Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. So when they meet someone who has faced theirs, it awakens a silent jealousy, a discomfort they can't explain. They will test you, challenge you, misunderstand you. That's why you must learn to move in silence. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your peace. You don't need to justify your healing. You don't have to prove your growth. True spirituality is invisible. It's not about words. It's about vibration. You can walk into a room and change its energy without saying a single thing. Remember, people who live in noise cannot handle silence. Those who feed on gossip cannot digest truth. Protect your peace like a sacred garden. Only those who have pure intentions should be allowed to walk through it. The awakened must learn to practice what Jung called inner containment, the art of holding your energy within you until it matures. Don't rush to speak your revelations. Don't rush to announce your transformation. Let your life reveal it. Those who are truly awake don't talk about awakening. They embody it. The greatest proof of your connection to the divine is your calm. Not your words, not your followers, not your claims, your calm. When the storms rise and you remain still, when chaos comes and you stay rooted in faith, that's when heaven recognizes you. So guard your spirit. Protect what God is doing in your soul. The most sacred things lose their fragrance when exposed to the wrong atmosphere. Not everyone deserves access to your silence. Not everyone is ready for your truth. Sometimes the holiest thing you can say is nothing at all. Comment this phrase below: sacred things grow in silence. And if this message resonated with your spirit, subscribe, because your awakening has only just begun. When you begin to walk the path of awakening, something subtle yet powerful happens. Life starts speaking to you in symbols. Dreams become vivid, coincidences become messages, silence becomes instruction. Jung called this the language of the unconscious, the bridge between the visible and the invisible. And once you learn this sacred language, you must guard it, because not everyone can hear what you hear. There's a reason prophets withdrew into deserts, mystics lived in solitude, and saints guarded their words carefully. They weren't hiding from the world. They were protecting the vibration of what was being born within them. Every revelation, every awakening, every divine insight comes in seed form. Speak it too soon, and you expose it to the cold wind of misunderstanding. Nurture it in silence, and it will bloom into something immortal. The fourth thing you must never reveal is the depth of your inner transformation. Not everyone who claps for your growth celebrates it. Some are applauding just to keep appearances, waiting to see if you'll fall again. Others unconsciously fear your progress because it reminds them of the parts of themselves they've abandoned. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most people don't want that understanding. They prefer projection. They will project their insecurities onto your evolution. That's why the spiritually awake learn to move quietly. Growth becomes their prayer, not their performance. Healing becomes their rhythm, not their identity. You stop explaining your peace because explanation invites interference. You stop defending your choices because defense attracts attack. You stop chasing validation because the awakened spirit no longer feeds on applause. It feeds on alignment. You begin to realize that silence isn't empty. It's full of energy. It's in silence that your intuition whispers, that God speaks, that the unconscious reveals its hidden treasures. Jung called intuition the voice of the inner woman, the anima, the soul's whisper that guides us toward wholeness. But the modern world fears silence because it reveals too much. People fill every moment with noise to avoid meeting themselves. If you are spiritually awake, you will find that you no longer fit into the world as you once did. Conversations that once entertained you now feel shallow. Environments that once comforted you now feel draining. The people you used to chase begin to disappear naturally. This is not rejection. It is redirection. Your vibration is changing, and the universe rearranges your life to match your new frequency. But here lies the fifth and final thing you must never reveal: your spiritual power. Power in the spiritual sense is not about domination, it's about resonance. True power is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It simply is. When you begin to align with divine order, when your thoughts, emotions, and actions become one with the will of God, something extraordinary happens. Your words begin to carry weight. Your presence begins to shift realities. Your very existence becomes a prayer. If you reveal this power prematurely, the world will try to use it for its own ends. People will attempt to manipulate your energy, to draw from your light without replenishing it. Some will even fear you, because true power exposes the weakness of artificial strength. Jung once wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking." That is the paradox. True spiritual power is rooted in love, not control. The more awake you become, the more you'll realize that the spiritual journey is not about superiority, but surrender. To awaken is to see that you were never separate from the divine to begin with. You were only asleep to it. Awakening is remembering, not becoming. And in that remembrance, you begin to move differently. You stop arguing, stop convincing, stop forcing outcomes. You start trusting divine timing. You begin to understand that every delay was protection, every loss was redirection, every ending was initiation. Jung often compared the human soul to an alchemical process, it turning into gold, darkness transforming into light. But what most people forget is that alchemy happens in fire. Transformation requires heat. To awaken spiritually is to walk through the fire of your own unconscious, to face the shadow you've spent your life avoiding. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And when you make peace with that darkness, you gain something the world cannot give you: inner authority. You no longer seek permission to exist. You no longer apologize for being who you are. You no longer explain the sacred to those who mock it. You begin to live from your center. And that is the most dangerous thing to the ego-driven world, a person who no longer needs validation. You'll notice that your energy changes before your environment does. You'll feel it before you see it. That's why silence and solitude become sacred. You are recalibrating your vibration. The more time you spend alone with God, the more your frequency stabilizes. People will feel it without knowing why. Some will feel peace around you. Others will feel discomfort. That's not your responsibility to fix. Your job is to stay aligned. Being spiritually awake means understanding that not everyone is ready to awaken. You can't force the butterfly out of the cocoon, and you can't open people's eyes before their soul asks for light. The awakened don't preach, they embody. They don't argue, they demonstrate. They don't boast, they bless. When Jung spoke of individuation, he meant becoming whole, not perfect. Wholeness includes your light and your shadow, your faith and your fear, your strength and your fragility. The spiritually awake know how to hold both without collapsing. They know that God works even through their weakness. They understand that the divine uses broken vessels to pour living water. That's why you must never reveal your spiritual depth to those who haven't yet touched theirs. It's not arrogance, it's protection. The spiritually blind will try to explain your vision. They'll call your calling madness. They'll mistake your isolation for loneliness. They'll interpret your peace as indifference. But you are not meant to convince them. You are meant to continue walking. There is a sacred loneliness in awakening, a silence between you and God that no one else can understand. It's the silence of the chrysalis before the butterfly emerges. It's the silence between the inhale and exhale, where eternity breathes. That is the space where the soul expands. Don't rush to fill it with noise. When you stop revealing everything, something magical happens. Your energy becomes magnetic. People sense your peace and want to know its source. But the truth is, peace cannot be taught. It must be found. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The spiritually awake are catalysts. Their presence alone transforms the room. But that power only remains pure when protected by humility and silence. So learn to love being misunderstood. Learn to smile when others misread your silence. Learn to find comfort in your solitude. The more you protect what's sacred within you, the more God will reveal. You don't have to explain your path to anyone. The divine sees you. The universe records your every step. Heaven understands the language of your tears. Keep walking in faith. Protect your mystery, because that mystery is your strength. Comment this phrase below, "My silence is sacred." And if you felt this message resonate with your awakening, subscribe, because your journey toward divine consciousness has only begun. The greatest danger for the spiritually awake is not darkness, but exposure. The modern world worships visibility. It teaches you to announce every movement, every thought, every feeling. But the soul grows in the hidden places. The roots of a tree grow downward in darkness before it ever touches the sky. In the same way, your spiritual strength is born in silence, in the unseen chambers of the heart. Jung wrote, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." The spiritually awake understand that what is unseen shapes what is seen. Energy precedes matter. The invisible always comes before the visible. That's why protecting your spiritual secrets is not superstition, it's alignment. You are not hiding, you are incubating. You are allowing the sacred to mature before it meets the world. And here is the paradox of awakening. The more light you hold, the more shadow you attract. Jung taught that the shadow is not evil in itself. It's the part of you that was exiled when you learned to perform instead of to be. When light appears, the shadow becomes visible. And when your consciousness expands, so does your responsibility. You must learn to navigate the tension between your divinity and your humanity. Never reveal your inner work to those who haven't yet begun theirs. When you start sharing how God is refining you, some will listen not to understand, but to measure. They'll weigh your spirituality against their standards, not realizing that what you're living is not doctrine, it's transformation. Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people, but few are willing to know their own. They prefer to talk about light while hiding from their truth. Your silence becomes your shield. It keeps your growth sacred and your energy clean. When you withhold your sacred process from public scrutiny, you are not being secretive, you are being wise. The spiritual realm honors those who know how to keep holy things unspoken. Have you ever noticed that when you talk too much about what you're becoming, you stop feeling it? That's because words release energy. The moment you explain a revelation, you reduce its vibration to a level the mind can grasp. But the spirit doesn't live in the mind, it transcends it. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates in symbols precisely because truth cannot be contained by logic. In spiritual growth, not everything should be translated into speech. Some truths are too luminous to be spoken. They are meant to be lived, embodied, and transmitted through your presence. That's why truly awakened souls often appear quiet, mysterious, and detached, not because they lack passion, but because they carry too much fire to speak casually. If you are spiritually awake, you will feel misunderstood, even by those closest to you. Jung said that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. But this loneliness is not punishment. It's initiation. It is the path through which your consciousness detaches from the collective noise and returns to its divine source. In that silence, God teaches. In that isolation, the soul remembers. And the longer you walk this path, the more you begin to realize that you were never meant to be understood by everyone, only by the one who created you. When you are awake, your frequency begins to interfere with the illusions of others. You walk into a room and the masks begin to shake. People may become defensive, nervous, or oddly reactive around you. They won't know why, but their unconscious does. Jung explained that the unconscious of one person can influence another's without words. Energy speaks where speech fails. That's why protecting your energy is an act of spiritual hygiene. You must also protect your dreams. They are the private language of your soul. The unconscious speaks in symbols that reveal your hidden desires, fears, and divine instructions. Jung built his entire psychology on the interpretation of dreams because he knew they are messages from God disguised as imagery. Never share your dreams carelessly. Some people will interpret them through fear, others through jealousy, and both can distort what was meant for your guidance. The spiritually awake learn to live from the inside out. The world reacts, but they respond. The world consumes, but they create. The world performs, but they transform. They become channels of divine order in a world addicted to chaos. But even then, they speak little, because true transformation requires no announcement. You are learning to become what Jung called individuated, a soul no longer defined by the collective unconscious. You are detaching from the illusions that once enslaved you, the need to please, the addiction to approval, the fear of being different. This detachment feels lonely at first, but eventually it becomes liberation. When you reach that level of awareness, life begins to test your humility, because now you can sense energies, read intentions, discern truth in silence. The temptation will be to speak, to reveal what you see, to warn or correct others. But wisdom whispers, wait. Not everything you see must be said. Some lessons are meant to be lived quietly. God does not reveal things for gossip, but for growth. So instead of speaking, you begin to pray. Instead of reacting, you begin to observe. Instead of defending, you begin to detach. This is how the spiritually awake maintain peace in a chaotic world, through restraint. Jung knew this inner restraint was a mark of maturity, calling it holding the tension of opposites, to hold power and humility at once, to know and yet stay silent, to see and yet forgive. In that stillness you realize something profound. Your silence becomes your sermon. Your calm becomes your testimony. Your consistency becomes your message. You no longer need to say, I am spiritual. You simply are, and this quiet strength confuses the world. Because the world measures worth by noise, and you are learning to measure truth by peace. When you stop revealing your inner life to those who are not ready, you also stop being drained by their opinions. Your focus returns inward. Your energy multiplies. Your creativity flows. You start hearing God's whisper in everything, the wind, a song, a pause in your breath. That's the realm of synchronicity Jung spoke of, the mysterious alignment between your inner state and outer events. Once you experience that alignment, you can never go back to living unconsciously. You start seeing divine order in chaos, meaning in suffering, purpose in delay. You become unshakable, because your peace no longer depends on circumstance, it depends on communion. The awakened learn that silence is not emptiness, it's presence. The more silent you become, the more you hear. The quieter your mind, the louder God speaks. And that voice does not shout, it whispers, it invites, it calls you by name. So never reveal your intimacy with the divine to those who still mock faith. Never try to explain your spiritual hunger to those who are satisfied with comfort. Never expose your sacred fire to those who live in the cold. Let your transformation remain between you and the Creator until it becomes uncontainable, until it radiates without words. Protect your secrets, because your secrets are your strength. Protect your silence, because your silence is your sanctuary. Comment this phrase below. My silence speaks louder than words. And if you're walking this path of awakening, subscribe, because the journey of your soul is only beginning to unfold. There comes a moment on the spiritual path when silence no longer feels like isolation. It feels like home. The noise of the world fades, and you begin to hear something purer, older, deeper, the voice within. Jung called this the self, not the ego that demands attention, but the divine core that quietly observes, guides, and transforms. To awaken spiritually is to return to that voice and to protect it with all that you are. At this stage, you understand why it was never wise to reveal too much. The things you once wanted to explain now feel sacred beyond words. The people you once tried to convince now fade into the background of your destiny. And the experiences that once broke you now appear as divine designs, carved precisely to awaken what was sleeping inside you. You begin to see that God hides in everything, in pain, in joy, in silence, in conflict. Every experience becomes a teacher, and every emotion becomes an invitation to understand yourself more deeply. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That's the essence of awakening, to stop running from yourself and to meet your own soul with honesty. When you stop revealing your inner process to the world, you finally give yourself the chance to live it. You start to embody truth instead of advertising it. The spiritually awake live in integrity, not perfection, but alignment. They fall, but they fall forward. They doubt, but they return to faith. They question, but they never quit. This is the paradox of those who see. They walk in light, but carry compassion for those still blind. Jung said that no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The awakened don't despise the darkness anymore. They understand that the shadow was never the enemy. It was the raw material of their strength, the part they had to face in order to awaken. And yet, the world will still test your silence. It will provoke you to defend, to explain, to justify. Don't fall into that trap. Remember, the light never argues with darkness. It simply shines. When you are rooted in your truth, no accusation can uproot you. You no longer need to prove your peace. You are peace. That's why you must keep your sacred things sacred. Never reveal the fullness of your light to those who cannot yet bear it. There is a timing for revelation, and it belongs to God alone. The spiritually mature understand that silence is not secrecy. It is strategy. The soul knows when to speak and when to stay hidden. Jung compared the human journey to alchemy, the transformation of the soul through suffering, awareness, and surrender. And like any true alchemist, you must know when to seal the vessel. Speak too soon, and the gold will not form. Silence allows the divine fire to finish its work. Those who are truly awake understand the power of spiritual discretion. They are careful with words, selective with company, and intentional with energy. They know that not every listener is a witness. Some are thieves of light, disguised as curiosity. So they move quietly, gracefully, like monks among noise, like candles in wind. And here's the hidden truth. What you don't reveal, God amplifies. What you protect, heaven multiplies. What you honor in secret, he rewards in divine timing. When your awakening is mature, your very existence becomes testimony. You no longer need to talk about your light. It becomes visible through your eyes, your actions, your calm. Jung once described individuation as a process of integration, not perfection. You are not becoming a saint. You are becoming whole. You are learning to embrace the divine and the human, the eternal and the temporal, the infinite and the fragile. The spiritually awake are not those who escape the world, but those who can walk through it untouched by its illusions. And in that mastery, there is humility. You realize that your awakening was never about superiority. It was about service. You were awakened not to show off light, but to carry it into the dark places of the world. Not to condemn those still sleeping, but to love them with understanding. To stand as proof that healing is possible, that peace is real, that God still speaks. But to fulfill that purpose, you must preserve your inner fire. The moment you expose your spirit to every wind of opinion, your flame begins to flicker. Guard it. Feed it with solitude, with prayer, with silence. Let God be your audience before the world ever is. There is a sacred power in being unseen, in doing the work quietly, in letting your transformation unfold in private until it's undeniable. That is where strength is forged. Jung knew that the soul's most important movements happen in darkness, like roots growing beneath the soil. The world applauds noise, but heaven crowns stillness. The world rewards exposure, but God rewards secrecy. The world values visibility, but the spirit values invisibility. What you build in secret will outlast what others broadcast. To be spiritually awake is to live in paradox, powerful yet gentle, aware yet humble, visible yet unseen. You begin to embody what Jung called the union of opposites, light and shadow dancing in harmony. You stop fighting parts of yourself and start integrating them. You stop chasing enlightenment as an escape and begin to live it as a practice. You realize that you are not here to escape the world, but to bring heaven into it. Every act of compassion, every word spoken in truth, every moment of restraint is a form of creation. The awake create peace by being peace. And when you stop revealing everything, people begin to wonder. They sense something different about you. Not ego, not arrogance, but depth. Your presence begins to awaken something dormant in others. Without words, you become a mirror, showing people what they could be if they too stopped running. That's how transformation spreads, not by noise, but by vibration. One quiet soul can shift the atmosphere of an entire room. One person anchored in divine order can silence chaos. That is true influence, the kind that doesn't need recognition. So as you continue on this path, remember the 5 sacred things you must never reveal. Your divine experiences, your wounds, your vision, your transformation, and your power. They are not secrets to be hidden in shame, but treasures to be guarded with reverence. Each of them carries a fragment of God's fingerprint upon your life. Protect them, and they will guide you. Expose them too soon, and you risk losing their essence. The spiritually awake are guardians of mystery. They understand that some truths lose their power when spoken too early, that the most sacred revelations are meant to be shared only with those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And so the final lesson is this: let your silence become your sanctuary. Let your peace be your protection. Let your actions speak the language of your soul. When you no longer need to be understood, you become unstoppable. Jung said it best: I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. And the spiritually awake choose to become light, quiet, steady, and eternal. Because in the end, awakening is not about what you say. It's about what you embody when the world goes silent. Comment this phrase below: I protect my light in silence. And if this message resonated with your awakening spirit, subscribe. Because this is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your transformation.